What's up there, Parker? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
All right, sounds good. I'm gonna grab a fresh coffee and give another like 2 minutes or so for let people in. So I'm just gonna do this for the moment, and if you want to mute your mic, you're fine, but I'll let you know when we're good to go. All right, all right. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for being here. Uh, once again, my name is Jeff Poseel. If you see me online, I'm the Chief Community Officer of EzHire Cannabis, and I have my associate here with me today, Parker Jackson. And today we're just going to, we're going to answer your questions. We're going to go through some of the overall job market concepts, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities. Um, Take a look at different pathways into the cannabis career zone. The main thing I like to tell people who are interested in working in cannabis is that they have to really understand sort of the timeline of where we are in the history of cannabis and the overall industry, and to remind people that it is still a nascent industry. It is completely evolving. Anything that you've kind of heard from the past or other states is going to be completely different moving forward into the future. Um, Laws, continuously evolve. The market shifts. And when it comes to jobs, that's also something that we have to keep in mind. So, being persistent and understanding, why you maybe want to be involved in cannabis is going to be very important. It's not all gravy out there. It's not always just a good thing, but you have to understand that that's kind of what the job market is in any industry. So if this is something that you truly care about, if this is something that you're curious about, want to know more about, or just know that you want to be involved, then we're happy to have you. And it takes some of that persistence and curiosity and passion and commitment to last. You're not going to be a millionaire overnight. um, and there's a lot of challenges that are just going to always be there, but again, it's not unlike any other market. Besides the idea that we actually have the chance to shape the market as we become a part of it through employment and engaging in different events and building a network of people that work in the industry. It's super fun. It's super exciting. And problem solving is one of those things that you should be aware of and that this industry requires. So if you kind of tackle that from an excitement standpoint rather than a no thanks, I don't want to deal with problems, then cannabis is going to be a great place for you to be. Um, Now, today we're going to go over, just again, like I said, purposeful and passionate paths, some of the challenges and future growth. We'll answer all your questions. Thank you again for hopping in and registering, asking those questions. When we finish up here today, we will certainly keep in touch. We will, deliver you a recap of what we talked about here today, offer you one-on-one, personal profile and conversations. If you want to continue chatting, we're happy to do that. Happy to help you with your EzHire Cannabis profile and speak to you directly on, your current position and standing and, any other questions that you might have. So I wanted to start here. And again, I know I haven't really introduced Parker so much, but purposeful and passionate pathways. So there's a lot of different opportunities and reasons why people want to work in cannabis. And that's one of the exciting things, is because cannabis is a community, and understanding that people come from all these different areas and reasons kind of makes the workplace a more fun and engaging place to be. So Parker just started working with EzHire Cannabis. He also works for Fluent Cannabis. He's located down in Florida. So Parker, I'd love to just introduce yourself and maybe talk to, some of the reasons that you've gotten involved in cannabis, wanted to get involved, and maybe, what you think about it right now. So, take it away. Parker, I think you're still on mute. Hold on one second.
Oh, okay. Should be good now, right?
Got you.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
So I graduated a couple years ago, and with the impending graduation, understanding that my priority after that was to get a job, started thinking where I could apply my skills, and I think that's really a great first step is, and something that you'll continue to reflect upon as you grow is really what your skills are, because that's going to help you kind of guide into what areas you'd like to be in and understand what the gaps are for getting there. So for me, I ended up landing with that thought of I just want to be in cannabis. And a big part of that was for reasons that Jeff has talked about, and certainly reasons that you guys are here, I'm sure, is how nascent it is, how exciting, and why that is exciting. It really, for us to get our hands in it, understanding that cannabis is really a privilege and an act of service to be in the industry. And it's coming from the social equity side of things, right? And it's really a social justice movement. So all of those reasons, were exciting, and then to jump into the industry. But as you start to, get into it more, you start to realize kind of what your passions are, maybe more so in it. And if you're lucky enough to have found that passion beyond, just cannabis, then you're really able to start thinking, hard and long-term about your career. And getting those steps, achieved. So for me, it's to be, entrepreneurial in the space. And obviously you can go out and do that today, and a lot of people are, but I've, taken it upon myself to try to get some experience in different areas, like going into the Fluent Cannabis, a multi-state operator, that retail environment, understanding what it's like to be operating in a retail environment. And then working, in selling some software before. I think really the biggest thing is just getting involved, obviously, and that's a really big, why you guys are here today and what we're really going to be talking about. But if you have that, passion and that motivation, it's going to, carry you through. So just putting yourself out there and seeing kind of where the directions take you, because there's a lot of turmoil in the industry. I out of school, I ended up selling software with Blackbird, who was, a startup competing with iHeart Jane and Dutchy, who are some big e-commerce players in the space. And then our company was laid off after 6 months of working with them, starting on this new sales team by Herbal, who's, collapsed even more recently this past summer, but was formerly the biggest distributor of cannabis on the West Coast, period. So just, getting into a company even that seems high and mighty, there's a lot of turmoil in this industry, and no one's immune to it. So definitely looking to constantly develop yourself and your skills, and what that takes, and meeting people is really what it's all about. So thank you all for being here today, and we're excited to continue talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think what I think is so awesome about what you're doing is by getting involved at like a few different angles. So like there's not only, these passionate pathways, and doesn't necessarily have to be passion, and it doesn't have to be one of these things, but by, working in a business development role and then moving into, like the retail space, that's really like the foundation of, at least the public facing, what the people think of cannabis jobs. They think retail, they think of the dispensaries that they drive by, or the billboards that they maybe see, depending on what state they're in. But that goes to, to what I was speaking about before: persistence, curiosity. The only way to really get into the industry is by getting involved. And whether that's applying for, various jobs, I think it definitely includes getting out into the market, whether that means visiting dispensaries, whether you're a consumer or not. These are places that you're allowed to go if you're 21 or over. There's a design element. A lot of them come off maybe a little bit more medicinal. Maybe some of them look more like recreational, and but these are little things that you can be doing all of the time, whether you're a consumer or not. It's not just about, smoking some weed with your homies after school or after work or something. It's understanding it from different angles. So something that I would say to the people on this call too is, if you're very focused on just one type of position or one role, I would encourage you to explore different avenues and maybe some alternative paths, because that whole relationship building and skill building and knowledge growing that comes along with any position, that's going to lead you to your next role. So I'm someone who have shifted industries several times, and always taking my skills and my experience with me to the next position. I've never thought of it as a wasted time. And I think that's what's really important for people. If you want to be in inventory and compliance, or, closer to that, you may need to start as a bud tender, but you know what? That's one step closer than not being a bud tender. So, I think, just to speak real quickly to some of these other reasons, medicinal benefits, obviously something I'm familiar with personally and with family. Cannabis is something that I used to do very recreationally as a kid. And then, I became the source for it for my uncle who had multiple sclerosis. And all of a sudden, there was no stigma within my family. The fact that I was, a cannabis user, cannabis advocacy, entrepreneurial innovation and research, career growth, which we're going to talk a lot about, social equity and justice, personal connection, sustainability, community building. Again, the idea is that by entering this workforce, you have to think of it as that you're a part of shaping what it might look like in 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And in your state, or, in future states where things, open up, it's a chance for you to get involved now when it is still early in the business. So moving on to some of the challenges and the future growth. Excuse me. So there's always going to be challenges, right? Like in any business, there's always going to be these things that exist. So regulatory complexity, right? These are federal legal status. These are the different hurdles that exist on a bigger level. We all know that this is, a challenge. So, we know what that is. That's something, if cannabis happens to be federally legalized, the amount of jobs that are going to go, open up and go live is going to it's going to increase like a hockey stick exponentially. But again, by being involved now, you have a little bit more, openness to what that might look like, and a little bit more control of what your career might look like moving forward. Licensing bottlenecks, again, regulatory and compliance. This is all sort of related, but in different stages. So in certain regions, licenses are limited for cannabis businesses. They're limited based on what you want to be, a cultivator, a retailer. There's, this idea that social consumption will require, different or additional licenses, delivery type licenses. So expanding the amount of licenses is something that I know a lot of states are working on outside of being a cultivator or a dispensary, a retail location. By offering different licenses, you open it up to allow more people those entrepreneurial opportunities, different career paths. But again, these are things that newcomers need to sort of understand entering the market, depending on where you are. So I would encourage you to get familiar with your local laws, your local compliances. Market saturation. It's really funny that we just talked about the idea that licensing bottlenecks could cause, a hindrance on jobs. Meanwhile, certain regions have been open for so long, or maybe their licensing procedure didn't run as smoothly as they thought, and there's actually market saturation. So this idea of overhiring, needing to cut back, and that back and forth in the job market is something that just it exists in every industry. So I would encourage people to maybe follow a little bit more along to cannabis specific news sources as well. You know, big media tends to highlight a lot of negatives. So just understanding that, cannabis is going to be this roller coaster ride, especially when it comes to jobs. But overall, the market is going to grow. So again, thank you for being here today and for showing that interest and curiosity. And Parker, I'll zip through some of these growth pathways, and if you have anything to add or insights on your own experiences, feel free. But
Yeah. I think
again,
one thing that was interesting actually in terms of like the compliance and regulatory complexity, I mean, another reason why I was excited to go into this industry, just, my background being studying business, it's the most highly regulated industry in the world. It's, consumer packaging goods, it's retail, it's, medical, it's all of the above. And the environments can be so different depending on where you are, state by state, town by town, even whether that comes to hiring or, the amount of jobs that are there, or the type of businesses that are there and how zoning is restricted. Having an understanding of kind of what that looks like, as specific as you can get to where you want to be, like, talking to those people that are in those, in those shoes that you want to fill, essentially, and understanding, how they have gotten there, what the process was like for them. But if you're able to understand kind of the challenges that are regulatory facing, I mean, these are facing every business. So understanding specific to kind of the business that you're looking to be a part of, what the challenges are just going to allow you to have a much greater conversation and broader perspective that's more valuable to the business. And being able to communicate that to them, it's great. And it's just a huge, value in having that mutual understanding. And it shakes questions right from your own back of like, what does it look like and stuff. It's going out and getting ahead of the ball with that and seeing what kind of information can you find out before you have this conversation, if you get an interview or whatever. Oh, you're muted now, Jeff. Yep.
I gotcha. That's great. I appreciate you jumping in there. And yeah, totally true. It's all, see, I find this stuff sort of fascinating because that it's going to change from where it currently is. So I think that's like a reason to be involved because raising your hand to vote, you have some accountability, you have some ownership, you have some interest, and I think that's a valuable thing to have when you're especially starting out in your career.
And most of the jobs that you'll be looking into, especially with cannabis being so highly regulated, you're going to need to have this understanding of like what this complexity looks like specific to your job function and potentially beyond that. So having that already as much as you can and coming to the table with that, it really sets you apart. And even beyond that, it could be, like you said, part of that job description of like, this is one of your roles and responsibilities is making sure that you're up to date on the ever changing kind of environment specific to your function.
Absolutely. And that shows, sort of like a leadership quality. It shows that you deserve to be there. And when you when there may be, you know, a different job that you want to slide into, even if it's within the same, you know, same business, but you want to take on additional responsibilities or kind of learn something about something else, you're going to be awarded that because you're showing that you are that involved and interested and learning as you go along. Adaptability is something that we talk a lot about when it comes to job seekers in cannabis, is because everything's going to be moving and changing, and particularly fast, or, you know, big ideas changing big and fast. uh, Being adaptive, being able to adapt is really important for, again, the business itself, but for your own skill development.
I think, like, too, when going back to how nascent the industry is, even the biggest companies are acting very much so like startups in the truest sense. So, and in a startup, you know, it typically, you know, smaller team and stuff, a lot of people having to wear multiple hats. So being able to have your hand and, you know, provide value in multiple areas where maybe you're not necessarily expected to at first can potentially be, you know, advantageous as well, for sure.
Awesome. Yep. um, And just want to jump in real quick. Anybody's welcome. I know you guys all asked. You asked the question when you registered, and we're going to go through those in the next couple of minutes here. But if you do have anything else to say, feel free to hop into the chat. You will, again, get a recap of this. Any sort of the links or information that we talk about here today, we'll be sure to follow up with you, and there'll always be a chance to, you know, chat one-on-one. We'll do a profile review through your EzHire Cannabis profile, and we can talk specific jobs or skills. And, you know, sort of ways to get more involved. Happy to follow this conversation today up with that. So, oh yeah, just to touch a little bit more on the growth side of things. Obviously, legalization, right? The tide is turning. More states and even countries, you know, outside the United States are you know, shifting, you know, being more accepting of medicinal and recreational use. This is obviously, you know, going to set up new markets, increase job growth. But there's also, you know, other ways that, you know, there's going to see some job growth. Diversification of products, right? So the products that are now available to buy at a dispensary or a head shop or wherever on the streets legally is just completely different. And not just ancillary products of like consumable, like, you know, ancillary products, glass and things like that, but edibles, beverages, topicals, concentrates. These things were not accessible to everybody. And so when there's new products, it will create new opportunities. So product development, marketing, sales, you know, these new products are going to need somebody to sell them. They're going to need somebody to market them. They're not going to be sold the same way that flour is sold. They're not going to be marketed the same way that flour is sold. So, you know, that falls right in line with the next bullet point here, research and innovation. It's obviously very related because, you know, new products should really come out of research and innovation. So, you know, maybe a little bit further, you know, up the product chain of, you know, novel strains or different extraction methods that lead to new products. You know, R&D it's just poised for growth. And then again, you actually get interest from different types of job seekers who want to be involved more on maybe like the research and the innovation side rather than, you know, the end sort of sell point or, you know, consumer facing positions. And meanwhile, we also have social equity programs. So this is one of the things that I'm fascinated and so interested and so happy to be, you know, involved with in cannabis because of the past injustices related to cannabis prohibition. Social equity programs are giving opportunities, hopefully, you know, state by state, these things are still being figured out. But the initiatives, you know, they create opportunities for marginalized communities, hopefully leading to more job prospects in these areas. And of course, promote a more inclusive industry, which makes it appealing to me and should make it appealing to a lot of other job seekers. So again, just some of the growth pathways that we see to challenge, you know, those hindrances and those hurdles that just naturally exist. There are also these sort of exciting and more positive things to have an outlook for. So, Parker, if you have any particular thoughts on, you know, some of those growth pathways, feel free.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's constantly, you know, expanding in terms of what opportunities are even available, you know, what products are available. staying on top of some of that stuff is also, could just lead to some, you thinking about things that you weren't previously. The social equity programs are also, I think, great ways to get involved if you can look into them and see what they're doing on a more local level. Obviously, going back to that, this is a social justice, movement. Yeah, there's a lot of good reasons to get involved, and you're going to be able to find a lot of community through those kind of pathways. And, it's very rewarding at the same rate too, right?
Absolutely. So once again, everybody's jumped in and asked a question. So we're gonna zip through these questions right here. I want to make sure that we do answer your question. If they may be a little bit too particular or we're not experts, again, we are accessible to you post this conversation today. So one-on-ones, follow-up information, and connecting everybody else who kind of joined this call, connecting you to people who can directly help you is a goal of ours today. So we're just going to zip through this. We got another half hour here. If you're going to get the answer to your question, but it's super helpful if you want to listen to what other people asked. So there's no particular order here. It's just kind of based on when people joined up. And Parker and I will do our best to sort of offer some insights around the questions that you guys have here today. Okay, so do you think it could be risky to get a job fresh out of college in the cannabis industry, considering that some future employers may be anti-cannabis and have a bias against me as an applicant? I believe there was also an extra caveat here that they were thinking about government jobs in particular. Now, it's a valid concern, right? But the industry perception is changing. It kind of depends where you are, right? Because if your local laws, if your state laws, if your state has been, decriminalized or legalized, the businesses are not too far behind from changing those things. And if you're looking for a job in cannabis, again, I think it's important to understand that these businesses are very accepting, right? I don't know, Parker, do you have anything to jump in on here real quick? I can definitely expand on that, but I just want to catch
Yeah, I think federally,
you're closer to sort of entering the market. Parker, let's just say, is much younger than me. I got this gray haired chin. I have a couple kids at home. But Parker's,
I think certainly there is a risk, even just relating it back to like me coming out of school and, thinking about maybe stigmatisms I had to face. I luckily had a great, support group, but there really is a lot of just has to be that inner motivation as to I'm going to do this. Because the compensation and within this industry, it's a little bit different than some of the other ones. And that goes back to it being, a privilege and an act of service. While if you're worried about the bias, I think there is reason for that if you're planning to do federally government contracts. But as far as state to state, I think like Jeff is saying, like states like Colorado, Massachusetts are obviously a lot more forgiving for that stuff and actually have a lot of incentives for you to get involved even on the cannabis side of things. But I mean, I know this Society for Human Resources and Management, which is kind of looked to as like that opinion for the workplaces, like corporate environments and stuff. They do not say to test for cannabis. So that's something that they're still working through, of course, is like, the labyrinth of that legal landscape, and obviously still, getting rid of some of those stigmatisms, because of course everyone's perspective is different. And there's been a 70-year war on drugs based, rooted with deception. So there's reasons to be apprehensive about it, but certainly, there's that many more reasons to be excited about it. I think all of these challenges that we talk about today, you really have to look in the light of how they double as opportunities. So, a lot of people that are in this industry, they're very community oriented because they understand that, common struggle, and, what it really has taken them to get into this industry and to work in the industry and to deal with some of those stigmatisms, that may provide biases. But coming fresh out of college, I think it's a really exciting place to be. And I would have no doubts, if you wanted to secure government work later on with how things are moving, that even at a federal level, that will be possible, soon.
Yeah, yeah. And not particular to possibly working in a federal government situation, but within work dealing with, family or friends, teachers, mentors, um, dealing with that stigma, I think one of my go-to ways that I think you know, people should have some like hard data readily available for these naysayers,
Yeah.
that they can kind of relate to, right? So like 38 states currently offer some sort of access to legal cannabis, right? That's including medicinal, as well as the adult use 21 plus states. So the amount of people that already have access to cannabis legally is a huge number. The amount of revenue involved. So it's expected the cannabis industry is expected to reach $30 billion of revenue in this year alone. So the reason I'm bringing up like numbers like this, over 420,000 people currently work in legal cannabis. I just feel like these numbers are relatable for somebody who's naive to this industry. These numbers, 400,000, 30 billion, they mean something to people in other industries and who are familiar with other businesses, right? So having this awareness of the current market status is I think very helpful, and should give you confidence when you're having these conversations as well, because I think that's to a degree it's having a right mindset when you're going out there and having these conversations, knowing that somebody might question it, but just having that confidence and being prepared to have the conversation. So there is an education aspect here of just staying on top of what's really happening and these changing. It's week to week now. There's large policies and huge federal changes are being proposed and knocked down and proposed and changed, and like, so this is something that people do hear about way more than they have for the past 50, 60, 70 years of this being a possibility. So um, you have to understand the bias exists, the stigmas exist, but uh, being on the right side of the fight feels good sometimes. So that's what I would say to you.
Yeah, I mean, I like to phrase it like this too. I mean, as soon as I kind of made that decision of that I was gonna, go into cannabis, without even completely understanding what the job market looked to me at that time, it was about like also when dealing with those stigmatisms and bringing it up to people, you just want to make it your baby. You want to be proud of it. You want to love it. You want to show it off to everyone. You want to talk about it. Like that's really how you have to treat it. And I think if you have that passion, it'll carry you through, and you'll understand that there's a risk, but really, you recognize that you're a risk taker, and that's kind of what makes things exciting as well. Which I think is something that obviously everyone that's come to this industry really recognizes and shares.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. So you have industry growth, transferable skills, education and advocacy, all things we just touched on. But I believe some of these things touch on one of the next questions we have here. So, what advice do you have for someone looking to successfully break into cannabis? Right. So, again, these are things that we continuously touch on, but are very important for you to understand. So, having the education to educate yourself, learn about the industry, catch up on your local areas, understand what's different, what has changed. You can learn about the different sectors within the cannabis industry. One thing that I think kind of blows people's minds once in a while is like, if they think cannabis jobs, they think of a dispensary. They think of the place that you as a consumer can buy cannabis, and that essentially mirrors a retail space. But the truth is, the industry, right? It's not just the cannabis business; it's an industry. So full scope. I mean, there's agriculture, it's retail, it's manufacturing, it's supply chain, it's transportation, it's it's all of these different types of businesses rolled up into one industry. And understanding what you are interested in could help. Um so getting something like breaking into the industry is, again, like all these things that we're talking about, over 400,000 people work, growing industry, growing market, jobs are going to be growing. Like, it is an appealing industry versus, somebody who is in the newspaper publishing business, or who was like a writer for a newspaper 20 years ago. Like, that entire industry has changed. So I think it's important to not focus on the challenges that we discussed already here today, but to really focus on the positives and what the future of job growth and the industry overall
Yeah.
looks like.
Doubling those challenges as those opportunities is really, that's the way to go.
That's a great way to say it. And if you're somebody who doesn't have cannabis direct experience, the networking, getting out to events, going to dispensaries, going to product launches. There are ways to network with people in real life. And then, of course, there's online, right? So,
Yeah, even volunteering, right? I mean, that's a
yes.
way potentially locally, right? If you can't find an open role at first, even just in your some of that free time, maybe looking to volunteer at one of the local companies. It just can help you meet others in the field, demonstrate, your commitment to potential employers, and there's company leaders that could recognize you, and it just could putting yourself out there and just making sure that you're taking these steps like Jeff is kind of broaching to just make sure that you're doing those things to make sure you're putting yourself in the best position where you'll be successful.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you think about it, even if your state is not legal, there are advocacy groups trying to make it legal, right? Who
Mhm.
would welcome your volunteerism, and just to have another idea and another body and another voice as part of that fight. Putting you on those sort of front lines leads you to be in a good position when your state does open up to you have this portfolio, you do have experience even without being able to have maybe the exact experience that you've wanted. And from a resume, cover letter, profile standpoint, I like to call this coming out of your cannabis career closet. Again, getting away from those stigmas, and being able to put yourself out there, to say that you're interested in working in cannabis, to follow those people online who are talking about it every day, to comment, to ask questions. There are ways to get involved, without the specific job right now, but those activities will help you break into the industry because you're building a network, you're building relationships, you're learning about it. All of that is very important. You can't just go into this being like, hey, I think I'm good. It's your growing industry. It's like you need to kind of have a little bit of all of these curiosities to become a part of who you are, but you have to share those interests and curiosities with other people. You have to make it sort of public. Resume and profile standpoints, again, like same thing that you would do with other jobs, but maybe it's a little bit more particular. When you're writing your objective, it's like, what does cannabis mean to you? Maybe you do have a family member that cannabis sort of changed their lives or made an impact, and that's the thing. It's okay to share, I think, that personal connection when it comes to cannabis, because I think, again, the companies that are hiring are also looking to hire healthy and productive teams. So this idea of diversity and inclusion, your reason for wanting to get involved can be a part of that diversity, because you might have somebody who literally just likes smoking cannabis and it does something for them personally and it's a personal connection for them. Maybe it just helps them with some of their social anxieties, or preventing them from taking other medications that they don't really feel so good on, or keeping their own body and mind in a good space. Meanwhile, yours might be completely unrelated to your own body mind connection, but it might be an experience that you've had with a family member or a friend who was addicted to opioids at one point and now gets relief from cannabis. And again, there's just so many different ways and reasons to want to enter this market. So I think it's important that you come to it with that personal interest and that personal connection. And I believe that outside of other industries, cannabis is willing to hear those stories. They're willing to look past the idea of not having maybe direct cannabis experience, in certain roles, because of this passion and commitment to it. That can get you that job, showing and proving that you have that true interest and that it's genuine for you. That goes a long way. All right, so we'll jump into the next question here. Once again, thank you so much for being here today. We do this every week, so jump in next week, ask another question, share it with your friends. We'd love to get some more people engaged here, but I appreciate you being here today. Why is it so difficult to secure a senior level director of cultivation or operations in the Los Angeles area, even with 20 years of experience? Okay, so I appreciate you sending this question in. It is quite particular. So I don't exactly know, your 20 years of experience. 20 years of experience is fantastic, right? But it's hard for me to say in that region, that particular role, your type of experience, what that really is. So it could be high demand. LA, highly competitive. Once again, it's been legal for a very long time. So that's just one of the situations. Again, I'm not saying that you don't have the skills to do it, but there could be a high demand. The regulatory complexity, again, right? Frequent changes. I don't know, again, your particular changes. The Los Angeles market, I'm not that familiar with, but maybe it's a chance. Maybe it's a thing of market maturity. Maybe it's reached sort of saturation, right? I am located on the East Coast. Parker's on the East Coast. I know that there has been an influx of West Coast people to the East Coast to be a part of, the developing side of the country here. And I wonder if that's something, if this person, whoever asked this question, if they've explored this idea of moving, especially with 20 years experience. That's something that doesn't exist currently on the East Coast. So that's another thing. Salary expectations, perhaps that's a standpoint here. Parker, any thoughts around this?
I think a big thing, and this is something that all candidates really struggle with, and is an ongoing process as you're applying to jobs, is really how you're, communicating your own value. So being how you're able to communicate that experience in terms of, what the employer is specifically searching for. So even just taking the time to really study that job description that they have posted, or even past job descriptions, or talking to some people that are in those positions and understanding specifically how those roles and responsibilities stack up against your experiences from the past. Because the more confident that said employer is that you'll be able to succeed in these roles, then the more, basically, you want them to be able to see you in that role, right? And that's what's going to have them be able to hire you. They're not. So the better ways, and focusing on different ways that you can communicate this experience, because I think resume building is a big thing, and it takes a long time, and it often requires multiple perspectives to really come to a final product that you feel good about. And even then, there's room for improvement, because it's all about how you're communicating what you've done in the past, and then obviously getting that in a clear, concise way on that paper, but then you're able to take it much further than that, just having thought through all of this stuff. And then when you are finally able to get in front of that person, you're able to understand exactly what it takes to be in that role and communicate as to, your past successes or what have you, and how you will get that done. So I think really the communication aspect is something that can't be lost when just applying to roles in general, and how you're thinking about how things are being done on the other side, as well as to how they're getting these profiles and considering these candidates. What conversations are you actually able to have with them, and what's going on? Yeah, I think also like the demand for talent, like Jeff has said, is certainly different on the East Coast and in some of these more emerging markets, maybe even like the middle of the states now, that are just starting to open up, but really require people that have these great depths of experience. Like 20 years cultivating is really much more valuable and just impossible to find in some markets right now. So doing some digging as to where maybe you would like to apply yourself beyond that area could be valuable valuable. And obviously it's just kind of expanding your search. I mean, the more applicants a business is able to have, the better for them, the more, but the more companies you're able to consider yourself, the more opportunities you're able to sift through and understand, if it's something you want or not and why.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great insights to add. That communication factor needs to be addressed, right? And especially if you are having trouble getting a job, it's worth revisiting. What
And there
that
are
language.
times like you're gonna, not even get a response. So, looking at to what your communications look like, even when there's no communication as to how you're reaching out and stuff. If you get no response on a job or you get a no, for instance, go ahead and do your best to find out why. Getting a little, and not every company is going to have the time of day to have that conversation with you. But once you get that, it could be invaluable.
Awesome. Totally. All right. And so, quite fitting, we do have a next question about what does it take to become the director of cultivation? What type of individual background is a company looking for regarding this position? So, here we are. We have somebody with 20 years experience in cultivation looking for that role. And then we have somebody, starting out wondering what the path is to get there. So obviously you need to start somewhere. So cultivation. So I've even seen some people in Rhode Island pretty recently, as of this past year, get a job working in a cultivation facility when their only growing experience before then was literally just having a garden. Their interest was in cannabis, but they were again proving their want to be in this, right? To be in horticulture, to be on that more like botany type side of cannabis. This person on their cover letter was describing how they take real pride in their vegetable garden that they feed their family from. And this was one of these, like, it sounds like bogus nonsense, but it's like, no, that matters, right? Because if you can't legally grow, or if you're not willing to, cross into those gray zones of maybe growing some cannabis when it might not be legal where you are, or if you don't have the proper license, showing, proving that you have this interest, that you're paying attention to the soils and nutrients and the different factors that are involved. I think that's something that this person can kind of take with them, right? Having this goal of becoming a director of cultivation is fantastic. So in order to understand the cannabis side of it, it would be, maybe you have to start off in a role where you're a trimmer, right? And you're getting that first role during Croptober when people just need seasonal work, but you're going to be able to get your hands on a plant. You're going to be meeting other people that work in that business. You're going to be surrounded by other people and all of like the different processes that it takes. So in order to move up to a director of cultivation, you do need to have this experience. So getting involved at whatever level you can on the plant touching side is going to be key, right? Again, even somewhere, if you're starting as a bud tender, that path might look a little bit further, but being a bud tender is a lot closer to being a director of cultivation than working at Bed Bath and Beyond is, or working at Foot Locker selling sneakers. Again, because you're putting yourself out there, you're getting engaged, and you're just that much closer to that role. So I believe a director of cultivation would require extensive cannabis cultivation experience, working in a facility for several years. I don't know the particulars on what, I believe every business, and depending on the size of their grow, size of facilities, what, their philosophy on growth, what they're actually growing, these things are going to determine the length of time maybe required that you be in those situations. But getting involved to start is necessary. And I believe it's important that you, if that is what you want to do, then you need to be aggressive towards understanding that path. And
Yeah,
asking those.
Jeff, I feel like what you're talking about too is like you're working backwards, right, from this goal. You recognize what this goal looks like, and now you're trying to figure out the steps backwards as how to get there. So I mean, if it starts as that bud tender role, maybe that's what it looks like. But for someone with a little bit more experience, you have that path already defined a little bit more so, and more of an understanding of clearly what it looks like. That's really the goal, is as you work backwards, you're able to understand and make more of this clear pathway for yourself to that director of cultivation role. So for someone, even someone that's looking just to break into the industry, I highly recommend looking into, again, those roles that you could see yourself in 10, 20 years, and looking at those job descriptions. So if it is that director of cultivation role that's going to require that extensive, kind of knowledge and experience in that environment, looking at even just simply those job descriptions that are out there now and those postings and what they're saying the roles and responsibilities and requirements would look like. And then again, continuing to work backwards and understanding kind of where those gaps may be currently and how you'll get there. So continuing to focus on building that path towards that end goal, and you'll see success as long as you're focused on that. I mean, again, like the steps that we talk about today, as long as you're hitting all of these things, you're getting involved, you're meeting people, you're learning more, you're putting your best foot forward, that's going to carry you.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things about, this level of a job, right, a senior level type position is not only are you going to need to understand the cultivation side, right, the plant biology, soil science, the environmental conditions. That's all obviously crucial, right? Disease control, optimization, yield. You're going to have some business, some business knowledge here, right? Because you're going to have a say in business decisions if you're that high level of a position. So having a solid understanding of the financial aspects of the cultivation, right? Budgeting, cost management, energy usage, all of these things can be a valuable asset. So, when you're going to have a vote, or you're going to have a pitch one day to maybe bring in a new type of, a new machine that might do something for you, or a new, whatever things that your facility might need to get upgraded. It might be a huge expense, but if you can understand the business insights that go around that, and the business opportunities and the financial opportunities that come from that, making that investment, I think that might be one of the main differences from, just working in cultivation versus being one of these higher level roles, is knowing that you're going to be involved in business decisions as well. So if you're somebody who likes to just be sort of tucked away in a grow house, maybe director of cultivation isn't for you. But again, every business is different. Every role and responsibility is going to have its, sort of different outliers.
And that's why, like, having those conversations with people that are in those roles, being able to kind of gain that perspective sooner than later is important. So if you're seeing that job description, you're already understanding that, there's a lot of talking to people, and that's not necessarily what I was envisioning. Obviously, you'll have to look a little bit elsewhere. So there's definitely, opportunities out there now in forms of podcasts and stuff, and it's definitely hard to find, but that's available, of people that are in these positions and talking about and communicating their challenges and kind of, their path as to how they got there and stuff. But and seeking that information out is going to be, really, really valuable. I think also too, like in terms of the director of cultivation, you're looking at, like you said, that business side of things, but also a huge aspect on the people and management side of things probably as well. And just breaking some of those stuff down. It's like, if I'm not, I may have to understand these financials, but I also have to be able to write these type of SOPs and stuff, and be able to manage this team and make what this team and define what they do. And it's like team building, those aspects, again, working backwards from where you want to be, the volunteering, get involved with, new people and new perspectives, and then achieving, goals together, stuff like that. I mean, it really, it translates.
Yep. Parker, are you good to go past 1 o'clock if we need to here?
Yeah.
All right. And if anybody else has to jump, just because we're going to go over a little bit over time, once again, you'll have access to this full complete video and, follow-up recap emails as well. So I think we only have a couple more questions, but we'll zip through. Here's a few more. What exactly is cannabis retail looking for? Qualities, experience, and traits in a candidate, bud tender, or manager? Yeah, so there's product knowledge, right? It's customer service skills, communication, attention to detail, teamwork, right? It's kind of like an open environment. You're working very closely with a lot of other people. You're working with people that don't, consumers and customers, people coming into the locations. You're going to have, you're going to have some drop-ins maybe by some government officials managing those sort of compliance and regulations. So, being professional in a professional setting, understanding that this is a job, I think is important. But it can also be sort of fun. Uh, Management wise, you're gonna have to have a little bit more of those like leadership skills and experience, probably some experience in retail management. Just again, understanding some of the more business sides of the things, literally profit margins, inventory management, budgeting, leadership skills as far as working with your employees, performance management, training, developing your staff. So there's a lot. So I think a basis, a genuine, general basis for this idea of cannabis retail is what is, think about your experiences in retail, whether that's as an employer or as an employee or just like actually shopping, right? So I think that's a good foundation to take into account if this is somebody who's not familiar with cannabis particular. But then again, I think the main thing that would be different in cannabis is the compliance. And Parker, you're currently working in a retail dispensary, is that right? So,
Mhm.
what do you think is some insights to add here for this person who asked this question?
I mean, they're definitely looking for someone that's adaptable. I mean, and that's, in terms of just skill set, adaptable with people, being able to work really well with people, because obviously you're going to be customer facing, but then oftentimes you'll be having to, coordinate with other people on your staff to get things done. Sometimes, they'll know something that you don't because they've just started there. And so being really comfortable with asking questions and remaining constantly curious, kind of thinking about what do I not know right now, in relation to kind of where do I want to be. And then, being comfortable with communicating kind of your concerns and really managing your expectations, with your manager or whoever it is that's helping you, be supervised. And because I think that stuff, right, is you're getting into the shoes of the person that's managing you, as far as like figuring out what kind of goals do I have, for myself, how does that relate to kind of their concerns, and for the business maybe itself, or just for the staff, and how can I be helpful in that way, and working towards that goal simultaneously with them, allowing kind of, if you're allowed, allow the managers or whoever to prioritize some of the stuff, that can be great. So thinking about kind of what their problems are and thinking about how you can allow them to prioritize some of that stuff and you handle other things. That's going along that adaptability route, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things to be done in that retail environment. There's constantly really ideas that are being tossed around, but don't get acted on until 6 months from then or whatever. So staying up to date on goals for yourself, but also goals for your retail environment is important, because the more you can have those be top of mind, the more conscious you're going to be and effective while working there. And that'll be recognized amongst your teammates, but also your supervisors and peers quickly. I mean, it's something that resonates not only within yourself, and you feel that kind of within yourself, but it translates amongst the team. And so I think the team building aspect is huge, but really how you can communicate and connect with people at its simplest is like number one skill you could probably give anyone. So I think that's the most important probably in retail is, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And again, something bud tender, you'll see plenty of job descriptions. So you can kind of start there, right? You can kind of start there and again work backwards. Like, what if there's one place that you actually want to work? Maybe it's the only one like local to you. It's like, see exactly what they're asking for, right? And
Yeah,
then
and even
you're
understand that, right? I mean, some of these descriptions are going to look different. An environment like in Florida versus Massachusetts, which has that a recreational side open. The sales numbers are going to look different. The wait times are going to look different, and the expectations as the bud tender will certainly look different. So maybe you have a description that's talking more about sales goals and wanting you to think about these kind of key performance indicators that track your progress there, like, am I getting these people in and out of the door within that 7-minute time frame or 10-minute time frame average, or what does my average basket size look like? Some of these may want you, especially in that bud territorial role, to have a little more focus on those sales kind of outcomes. So not just, again, remaining confident in yourself and curious is going to see you success. I mean, anyone can learn sales. It bottles down to, again, more simply connecting with people, understanding, problems, and being able to share and gain that perspective. That's what's going to see you successful with sales. So if you have that understanding, maybe you haven't come to a sales environment, and now they expect you to be making a certain amount of, dollars a week or whatever in terms of product, being comfortable with that and really just taking time to break down like what that looks like. It could remain intimidating at first, but, I think within the first 2 weeks of working at Fluent, I sold over $8,000 in product. And that sounds like a ton, and it's substantial, but without me kind of, going into it at first, I had no understanding as to, what the ticket numbers and stuff looked like. And if I was to broach, a more established market like Massachusetts that has some of these sales outcomes more defined and underlined for these people, then I would be a little bit more intimidated for sure, and having to understand like math in my own head as to how things work. And, there'd be a lot of questions that would arise. And that's where it's just helpful to be, comfortable and confident and curious when talking to people, whether that be the hiring manager or someone in that role, or your coworker, as to how you're going to get it done, because they, that's going to build in them that trust with you as well. So.
Awesome. Good points. All right, so we'll zip through these last few here. Is there any opportunities in Cleveland, Ohio, or the surrounding areas? So I'll take this one up, and we can kind of just answer this pretty quickly. Yes, there are opportunities, hopefully a lot more very soon. EzHire Cannabis actually has a partnership with the Cleveland School of Cannabis, which is a great organization, focuses on that education, giving out certificates. I mean, means you're investing in your education, but that's that's a route to look at. They have they use EzHire Cannabis for their candidates, but yes, there is a medical program, right? And currently, right now, there is, I believe it's called Issue 2 to commercialize and legalize cannabis in the state of Ohio. So it's on the ballot this year in November. So I would say vote, get your friends to vote, maybe get involved in some of those groups that are out there right now, because there's probably like less than a month until that vote comes. So there's a chance right now to volunteer. I guarantee it. So do some searching in your area. But if it's on the ballot now and doesn't pass, yes, there are still medical ways to get involved. But if it's on the ballot now and doesn't pass, then it will next year. And it won't next year, then it will in a year after that. So I would say get active right now in your community and do what you can to get involved in that advocacy side of it for the next 3-4 weeks. Get involved. Okay, next question here is, I spent 3.5 to 4 years working in California cannabis market before switched to CSM role in a B2B SaaS company for the past year. Was laid off in June and relocated to Chicago. With that in mind, how should I go about looking for roles in Illinois? Well, luckily you moved to a adult use 21 plus market. Illinois is much newer than California, so understanding those market differences is going to be a key thing. But knowing that you have experience in cannabis is something that a lot of people in Illinois don't currently have. So leaning into that is, I think, very key. Even if the market does look different, even if the regulations do look different, even if the consumer base looks different, it is something that you can personally lean on in order to get that job. And to get involved. So Parker, any thoughts here?
Again, translating that experience from that California market and how, you understand what a mature market looks like already. So you're not, you have that outside perspective that's, Chicago and Illinois, have even leaned on in terms of developing, their markets, right? I mean, they've looked to the West Coast for a lot of this stuff, and for inspiration in terms of regulations and such. And that also goes along with these business and sales processes. So being able to take those and, have an understanding of what it looked like there, and it could be really valuable to some of the salespeople that you'll be meeting, and that's specific to even just the processes behind like doing the customer success versus versus sales, just kind of that SaaS environment, right? And I know Illinois in particular has some more budding companies for that space. So, looking to get involved with some of those people locally if you can. That community environment, like they want people to get involved in the community, especially, again, the people that have experience in this industry, to get re-involved. No one relocations and, layoffs is not something that, again, back to the turmoil of this industry, it's not new to a lot of these people. They understand it. So being comfortable, confident talking about that, and, leaning on that sometimes even too, to get a conversation with these people could be really beneficial. But yeah, I think looking into getting like a short list of also of just those companies over there, and ones that you'd be interested on, and then going from there and figuring out maybe which people are available that I could potentially reach out and such, and what jobs are open and stuff, and just like really identifying these potential opportunities to to branch out.
Yeah, and lastly, just from a profile sort of resume standpoint, make sure everything's updated with your, your new location. If something still happens to say California on it, probably can't, probably is not going to help you move along in any sort of like job search process. In particular, like the badging process for a cannabis employee, make sure that all your licenses is make sure everything is switched over to Illinois, right? Your actual like driver's license or like state license. Make sure all of that stuff is also updated along the way. How are older workers accepted and integrated into the workforce, both socially and professionally? Yeah, I think it's a great question. But if you've ever been in a dispensary before, one of the most fascinating and awesome things that I think is the inclusivity, and that's both on the employee side as well as the customer side. When you walk in there, there's people, who look all different sort of ways. The age range is just all over the place. There's this idea that you may have experience and some wisdom that younger people don't have, a professional respect. Maybe there's like almost like a mentorship type of thing that you can take. But I think making sure that you are in that continuous learning mindset and open to upskilling is going to be very important
Yes.
to shutting that down as a stigma of being an old worker.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in the past, when I've had this sort of cross generational workplace where I've worked very closely with people either older or younger than me, like I've enjoyed it from both sides. And I think like, having a common workplace and then having that common workplace be cannabis, I don't know if there's any other industry or place that's
Yeah.
more accepting.
I think it's really not a concern, thankfully. I mean, it's something that you're going to be thinking about, at this age, I guess, and going into any industry at this point. But I wouldn't, take it as more of a concern for this industry at all. I think, like, Jeff, and what we've been kind of reiterating and why we're so, excited to be a part of it still is that community and environment, and, everyone being pretty supportive of one another, and understanding. So, I'd be excited about it for sure. And
Yeah,
also,
there
as
you
far
go.
as that, the CSM question from the last role on the software as a service, reaching out to recruiters certainly is important, because that's a little bit more of a specific role where your expertise is going to be a little more niche. Obviously, you have transferable skills and such, but in terms of that position, that's something that could be filled very quickly because of how recruiting just works over there and the amount of companies that are over there and SaaS environment in general. I definitely, the best piece of advice is to get in touch with some recruiters that are touching on those SaaS roles and understand, and being forthright in those conversations as to that's specifically what you're looking for, and are you the best person to put me to be putting, and for me to be in touch with right now. That's gonna be big.
Awesome. Yeah, again, I think it's a mindset thing. So if you can get over this mentally, then nobody else is going to really recognize this either, and
Mhm.
enjoy it. Right? I always find that there's something to learn from people who are both older and younger than myself. Um, what careers are available in cannabis lab slash tissue culture jobs? So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here just because I have a little bit of a list, but they're integral to cultivation, right, and producing high quality products. So there are lots of different positions, or there's a need for this knowledge. It may not be listed as that in a as like a job title, right? But on the cultivation side, that specialty and that expertise of knowledge is required to be a part of there. So I wouldn't focus so much on like what the job title might be here, but I do have some to run down here. So, just standard cultivation technician, a tissue culture specialist. Again, it might not be that title where you're looking, but being a lab technician or an extraction technician, a research scientist, a
Mhm.
geneticist, a quality control manager, compliance specialist, somebody on the product development side, a lab manager, environmental scientist. I think it would be important to sort of dive into, what certain companies are using for like somebody who I guess like appreciates that, or is somebody who is looking for somebody who's more into the tissue culture expertise.
Mhm.
You might not find that in a job title, so be open to other titles that require that to be like a main piece of the responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's very important too when you're thinking about just like your career. Obviously, titles have some sort of, meaning in the workplace and outside of it, but, for the most part, it's really about what you're doing. So,
Yep, great point. I think we only have like two quick ones to finish up on. Once again, thank you everybody. If you stuck around, that's fantastic. And if not, you're still here. We'll have these out clipped out on YouTube. You can check in on your own question or some other questions. But appreciate you being here. I appreciate all the questions this week. I've been applying for a job as a bud tender for over a year. So I guess what they're saying is, what can they do now? Um, it's kind of hard to know without knowing exactly what you've been doing, but maybe leaning into the education and the knowledge. Perhaps that's the thing that's holding you back, the education and the training side of things. If you're not getting out to industry events in real life, if you're not joining these different online communities, these are avenues for you to get involved. I think being engaged is going to be key. Again, volunteering, becoming part of like the advocacy around it. And then perhaps, take a look at your resume and cover letter. Maybe that's where you're getting sort of blocked in the process. Uh, I'd love to chat with you one on one. If you haven't had created your EzHire Cannabis profile yet, I encourage everybody here to create that profile, then connect with me and we can do a one on one. I'll review your profile with you. I'll look where we can sort of enhance that and improve it. And sometimes it comes down to a language thing and your
mhm.
communication
Yeah.
when you're trying to get a job here. So it's hard for me to say exactly what you should be doing because I don't know what you have been doing, but um, you know, I would look at making some changes basically, preparing for the interviews, how you're preparing for them if you are, your appearance, how you're actually reaching out to these people,
Mhm.
following up. I think that's key. Parker, you touched on that earlier. I'm sure. Is that
Yeah,
what
I think
you're thinking about here?
continuing to seek feedback too, right? I mean, coming to places like this, but beyond of like people that you've applied to. I mean, going in there and just trying to ask them even like if you, there's many of these dispensaries. I mean, depending on the market, but you can get a visitor pass, whatever, that you can go in potentially and just have a conversation with someone there, or you can call them on the phone. I mean, if you're not able to get over there, that's fine. You can give them a phone call and be like, "Hey, I applied. Still curious. Have you got, have you guys filled the role? oh, okay, like, would there be someone I could talk to? Like, because again, the turnover rate for some of these, especially a position like the bud tender, is really high. And that's, not atypical for the industry. So, company to company, that's going to look a little different, of course. But the point is they do constantly, most of them constantly are looking for talent in some way. And having, understanding that they have, a qualified individual ready to go. If they have and you in the back of their head, then that's going to be, great for getting, looked at. But yeah, continuing to seek feedback, and that's going to allow you to understand kind of the gaps as to what you're missing now, maybe in your skill set, or how things are being communicated on your resume improperly or whatever, that are going to allow you to get to that next level. Because
Yeah.
it's really constantly changing with the bud tender roles, but people really value great bud tenders as well. So, having someone that can come in and is willing to learn and to, continue improving in that role is exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah, great insights. And also, maybe apply for a delivery role, right?
I
Or
think
a
that's great
trimmer
insight. Yeah,
role.
because I've
Yeah.
known a couple people that have, again, come in, maybe they're doing trimming, maybe they're doing delivery, and they wanted to do that bud tending, but this is how they work up into it. And it's like, you get that if you get into an agreement with an employer where you're doing that and you're having those conversations earlier on of like, and helping them understand that you're thinking this through, and even maybe again doing some of their work for them, of creating a plan for yourself and for them as to how you're going to get there. And then, being like, what do you think of this? I'm going to be trimming for the next 3 months. You'll probably need a new bud tender by then. I'd like to be working towards to get there. And it's like, yes. And then all of a sudden, instead of that 3 months, it's like in 3 days, because of how, someone had to move or whatever it is. And now that position's open, and they're able to consider you for it right away.
That's right. That's right. I believe this is the last question here. It just came in last minute right before the event started here. So, if you live in a country where weed isn't legalized yet, what can you do? So, um, first thing that comes to mind for me is advocacy, right? So, if it's not legal, I mentioned this before, it's thinking about state to state, but if it's actually country wise, then sure, like be a part of the groups that definitely exist who want to make it legal, right? One of these things too could be paying attention to these more mature markets. So maybe not somewhere like the West Coast or Colorado, Oregon, California, right? Because they've been established for 10 years. They're dealing with their own sort of challenges now, but maybe taking a look at what is happening in the states on the East Coast or some of these Midwest states. What does that process look like once it even does become legal, so that you're on the right side of being prepared. And of course, education is free. You can search anything online. You can read anything. So by getting involved, by reading, by focusing on that sort of knowledge and education now, I think that's really key. There's ancillary businesses as well. So anything in software development, anything that's kind of working in the cannabis ecosystem. There's a lot of different types of companies. They do a lot of contract work. And again, it doesn't have to be, a plant touching a business. So there's lots of different things and ways to get involved. And I think that's where you would want to start, is paying attention to what's happening where it is legal and how that's rolling out, understanding where your country is currently situated and who's working on that side of making it legal where you currently are, and getting involved in that is going to go a really long way for you when you have the more opportunities. And that's all we got for today. That was a long session today. I'm not used to having somebody else with some awesome insights, and someone to back me up when I don't give the best answer. So, Parker, I appreciate you being here today. Obviously, we'll be talking, later on, but everybody else, you'll receive a follow-up email. You'll be able to connect with me. You'll be able to connect with Parker. We're active on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and we're available for follow-up emails or, one-on-one chats, whatever it is that you might have. So, Parker, I appreciate you once again. Very helpful today. And, thanks for your time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you all for attending, and we hope, you found some valuable insight, and we're totally, here to act as resources and continue to help you in your search.
Fantastic. And we'll be here next week for another stream. So thank you very much. Peace.